Now we're going to talk about a big story that's broken over the last few days, which is 18 extremely popular NPM repos got hacked, and then a really dumb payload inserted into them that was designed to steal crypto. And the attackers behind this got away with a few $100 kind of thing. It fell pretty flat. Now, instead of you and me just talking about this, we've got Feross Aboukhadijeh joining us just for a few minutes to talk through this. Feross, of course, runs Socket, which is a company focused on supply chain security around things like compromised NPM repos and whatnot. They have sponsored Risky Business in the past, not currently a sponsor. That's not what this is. This is not a sponsored segment. But Feross, thank you for joining us. My first question is this a big deal? Because depending on who you ask, this is either the end of the world and the planet's melting, or it's really not a big deal. Which is it?
The answer is it depends. I think I see it both ways. On the one hand, this is by download count, probably the biggest supply chain attack that has happened in the NPM ecosystem, and maybe even beyond that. We're talking 2 to 3 billion downloads per week in the affected packages. On the other hand, the impact has been pretty disappointing, I'd say. The attackers managed to snap up about $500 worth of Ethereum and maybe $50 worth of some other miscellaneous cryptos. Somewhat of a disappointing performance for they had access to everything, and this is what they did with it. So it's, I don't know, somewhat disappointing.
You sound like me and Adam when stuff like this happens, when we're just like, oh man, they could have done so much more with this. You know what I mean? They're very disappointed in them. I guess one of the positives here is that this thing was detected extremely quickly and shut down extremely quickly. So we've seen a lot of headlines about how these packages get 2 billion downloads a week. But do we have any idea of how many downloads these packages received while they were compromised?
You can generally make some assumptions, but NPM statistics aren't very fine-grained here, and they also don't update in real time, so you have to do your best and really just extrapolate it out. So in this case, the package was live for on the order of an hour. We're talking about, in the hundreds of thousands or maybe tens of thousands of downloads. And so that's the part that's interesting, is we might actually see that long tail effects of this over time, as this package might be cached in folks' artifactories or even in local caches. And so this still could go out into a production build of a piece of software over the next several days or weeks. So folks really should actually search through their dependency inventories and make sure that they're not using the affected versions. There still could be impact to this, even though it's been taken down from the registry.
Now, I believe this is part of a broader campaign that's actually been going for a couple of months, or it has similarities to a broader campaign that's been going the last couple of months. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the technique used by the attackers here was a phishing email that impersonates NPM. So it looks like it's asking you to set up some 2FA on your account. Socket actually wrote about this about 2 months ago, back in July, when one of the engineers on our team received a phishing email. And what was interesting about the phishing email was it came from actually a legitimate domain that NPM uses, npmjs.org. But they actually use npmjs.com to send emails. And they didn't set up DMARC or any of the other email security headers on the .org domain. And so an attacker was able to send an email from this legitimate domain and got through because DMARC wasn't set up. So one learning there is, folks, you should set up DMARC on all domains that you use, even the ones you don't send email from here, because that's how it was able to get through. And that ended up affecting a couple of packages about 2 months ago. So Prettier was a big one, a big style kind of code formatting tool. And then the other one is, you're going to love this, a package called is. So what this is, a type checking library. It tells you, is it a number? Is it a string? But yeah, you'd think this should be part of the JavaScript language. It's a basic bit of functionality, but unfortunately, JS is one of these languages that has been around for 20 years now, and the rule is don't break the web, so they can never delete things or change things in the language. They can't go back and fix mistakes. And this is quite a popular library, and it was one of the ones that was backdoored. It's basically there to create a bit of a better developer experience for folks who want to do type checking, which is a common thing.
So just one more question. When you talked about how these phishing emails shared similarities and whatnot, do we think it's the same group of people who've been doing this for a couple of months and this whole thing's just culminated now, or it's just word got out that you could do this email sending?
I think word got out. They're using similar techniques, but it's a different payload over the course of the last 2 months. So the thing they do is when you click the link in the email, it takes you to a full proxied version of the site. So everything about the site looks the same, and they're just transparently proxying through to the real site. So you get the 2FA code and everything works as it's supposed to. It's interesting that it does seem like this has been picked up by folks, and we're seeing a lot of different payloads now using the same kind of initial phishing email hook.
But they're very disappointing payloads, as you pointed out, right? Everybody's very disappointed that someone managed to get all of this access and then just deploy something so crappy. Adam, I got a question for you. If you were going to... So clearly you do something like this at this sort of scale, you're going to get snapped pretty quickly. As we found out, these packages were live for an hour. The malicious code was live for an hour. If you wanted to pivot your access from being able to own these NPM packages and pivot that into some sort of persistent access, how would you actually go about doing that? You could do something really dumb, popping up unsigned malware into people's browsers for downloads and whatever. That's one way you could go, but there must be a more elegant way here. What would it be?
The answer is you need to be subtle, right? When you're doing something at this much of this, at this kind of scale, you can't do anything obvious because it only takes one person to start pulling the thread. And like with that backdoor, was it the Microsoft guys found in, was it Postgres, SSH? No, it was an SSH. The
SSH, yeah.
SSH. I'm like, yeah, that's, you want to be subtle like that.
That still got detected very quickly.
It still got detected.
The thing that these attacks they're doing wrong is they're not subtle. They do things like try to shut down the system or try to remove your files, or they do all this noisy stuff. If you were just a little bit subtle, and then you could get away with this being out there in the wild for even just like 7 days. We saw that with an attack. The first attack that turned me onto this whole thing was EventStream in 2017, and they were able to persist for about 7 days before they were caught. And that meant that the package got built into some real desktop software that was using Electron, and it got shipped out to users. And so I think that's the thing they're doing wrong, is they're just getting caught in an hour. So I don't know if that would be somewhat persistent, because now you have literally built artifacts that are signed, that are out there for users to install, that they've put on their systems that are backdoored. And that's what these folks are doing wrong. And what we're getting really lucky with is they're just being super noisy and super childish about what they do when they get access to these things.
All right, Feross Aboukhadijeh, thank you so much for joining us for a quick chat about all things NPM supply chain. Always good to see you. Cheers.
Glad to be here. Thanks.